Professor Dr. Metin Ekici will talk about the Köroğlu epic in the Turkish world and Georgia. But before, we should say a few words from his biography. In 1996, Professor Metin Ekici earned his PhD with a dissertation titled The Anatolian Cycle of Köroğlu Stones. In 1999, Professor Metin Ekici was appointed as an associate professor to the Department of Turkish Folklore in the Institute of Turkish World Studies at Ekici University in Izmir. In 2004, Professor Metin Ekici was appointed as a full professor to the Department of Turkish Folklore in the Institute of Turkish World Studies at Ekici University in Izmir. Since then, he has been working at the same position. Since 2008, Professor Metin Ekici has been serving as a vice chair of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee in UNESCO, Turkish National Commission. Since 2012, Professor Dr. Metin Ekici has been serving as a chairperson of the Department of Turkish Folklore in the Institute of Turkish World Studies. Between 2014 and 2018, Professor Metin Ekici served as a director of the Institute of Turkish World Studies at Ekici University. Besides, he has been member of institutions such as Turkish Studies Association, American Folklore Society, Middle East Studies Association, which have organized scientific researches on Turkish culture and folklore in general terms. Professor Metin Ekici participates in international congresses and conferences and represents papers in Turkish and English on Turkish folklore, Turkish folk literature, and Turkish culture. Besides, he joined to numerous field works about Turkish culture and folklore, and afterwards he prepared scientific classification and the archive records of the studies. He worked on the very important projects on Turkish folklore, such as project of collecting and analyzing oral and written cultural products in Aegean region, and project of the direction of Turkish epics, their transferring to Turkish and their dissemination. He is married and is a father of Alper Ekici.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ege State University for organizing such a nice conference on the literary space and the literary of the Ekici region. And coming from western part of Turkey, the Ekici is also very important for us, and all the cities and the cultures of the Ekici region are widely investigated by Turkish folklorists and literary scholars, not only in Turkey but also in Georgia and northern shores of the Ekici region. Today, I'd like to talk about a Turkic epic, which is one of the most common and wide epic in the world, I would say, because it has been known in a very vast region from eastern of Asia to middle of Europe. So, let me start with my writings. Turkic-speaking people and Georgians have long historical relations that it goes back to early times. As a result of living together for a long time, Turkic-speaking people and Georgians have shared so many cultural, social, economic elements. The people and the artists of two societies have borrowed many cultural creations from each other in the past, as is the case in Korea. Most of the borrowed elements are in the field of folklore and literature. One of the culturally shared elements between Turkic-speaking people and Georgians is the epic narratives about Köroğlu. In Georgians, it is pronounced Köroğlu mostly. One of the oldest traditions of Turkish-speaking people is the epic tradition. The oral and written epic traditions of this world have created a number of epics. The epic narratives of Köroğlu, the son of blind man, is the most widespread and known from Altai Mountains to India, from China to Balkans. There is no epic narrative like Köroğlu that has been spread in a vast geographical area where it has been narrated and written down by Turkish-speaking people and also their neighbors. The episodes and poems of Köroğlu have been narrated and sung and also published among Georgians, Persians, and Armenians in Caucasus. In this presentation, first I'd like to provide a brief information on the epic cycles and dissemination of Köroğlu narratives in Turkish-speaking world and in Georgia. The second, I will talk about the content and structures of Köroğlu episodes. In the conclusion part of my presentation, I will be on the reason for the dissemination of Köroğlu narratives. The epic narratives of Köroğlu, the son of blind man, is one of the most disseminated narrated and written down epic of Turkish-speaking people. The epic narratives of Köroğlu have been known not only by Turkish-speaking people, but also by their geographic and cultural neighbors, that as a whole or some of the episodes taken from its cycle has been known in Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China among the Uyghurs, and Tatars of Kazan and Crimea, and in Balkan countries. The epic narratives have also been known among the Tajiks, Arabs, Georgians, and Armenians. There are countless collection, examination, publication on the epic Köroğlu in Turkish-speaking world. Last year, in 2017, in the city of Bolu, in Turkey, a symposium was organized and dedicated to works on the epic Köroğlu. The title of the symposium was The Past, Present, and Future of Köroğlu Studies in the World. I'd like to share some of the. This is the statue from Turkey, and the red pointed place is considered as the mountains of Köroğlu, but there are many places in Georgia as well named Köroğlu, the castle, the towns, the names, and so many places. Not only in the Caucasus, but some other places also, we encounter the name of Köroğlu. So I'm going to talk about this publication, but the first written record of Köroğlu was done by Alexander Chausko, 1842, which was recorded in Caspian shores of Iran and then translated into English and published in England. In 1931, Pertevnai Boreta, who was one of the great Turkish folklorists, published the first Turkish scholarly work on Köroğlu epic, 1931, in Turkey. The largest Turkish scholarly collection of Köroğlu epic was done from a singer, narrator, the epic of Köroğlu, narrated by Behçet Mahir. This is my own work, published in 2004, the epic Köroğlu in Turkish-speaking world, a comparative study. This is by Muhammed Ataliyevich Kariyev, a Turkmen scholar, published an extensive study in Russian, Köroğlu. I don't know Russian, but if you know, you may read. It was published in 1968. The first Kazakh scholarly work on Köroğlu epic, Almaty, 1973, published by Melike Umarova. An Uzbek scholarly recording and work on Köroğlu epic Tashkent in Uzbekistan, 1996. There are some earlier works also. I just wanted to show you some of the important publications. This is an Azerbaijani scholarly recording and work on Köroğlu epic Bakü 2005. This book also considered a rewriting, I mean Latinization of the original copy is preserved in Tbilisi, in Georgia. It is still in the manuscript archive in Tbilisi. So this is the Azerbaijani Turkish version of Tbilisi manuscript. Musical notes of Köroğlu, Almaty 2008, as I will mention a little bit later, a Kazakh scholar from the conservatory took the notes derived from akins in Kazakhstan, and only musical notes are published. In Turkmenistan, a recording of Epic Köroğlu, Ashgabat 2012. 2009, and very large conference organized by Turkmens took place in Turkmenistan, and many scholars participated in that conference. And also, the Epic Köroğlu was registered to the Tangible Cultural Heritage Representative list by Turkmenistan. So these are the mentions in Georgian newspapers about Köroğlu, and the Journal of Tifliskie Vedamosti, 1830, number 68. The story of Bandit Köroğlu, his castle in Okuca, and its history. Let me go through, and I will show the slides also. At this point, I'd like to provide some information on the collections and publications of Köroğlu in Georgia. The information about Georgian versions will mostly be based on the information provided by my colleague Karabeyeva. She is with us. Although there is no written information when and how the name of Köroğlu or Köroğlu in Georgia and the epic narratives first appeared in Georgia, it can be assumed that since the city of Tbilisi at the crossroad of caravans at the 17th century, and many merchants from Iran and Ottoman Empire began settling at the city, and thus the epic cycle of Köroğlu has begun to fall in this century. So the history of Köroğlu epic in the city of Tbilisi, maybe the written records encountered in the 17th century. Alexander Cholsko, with other oral narratives, collected Köroğlu epic from the Azerbaijani Turkish-speaking singers who lived at the shores of Caspian Sea in the 1840s. Later, he translated the Köroğlu epic into English and published in English in 1842. This collection has been accepted the first full written collection of the epic. This publication made effect on Western literary world and also helped the dissemination of the epic in Caucasus. In 1830, about the history of banditry and castle of Köroğlu in Georgian was published in the newspaper Tifliskie Vedamosti. It might be argued that the first written record of Köroğlu is this publication. There is no scholarly evaluation of this publication yet. I mean, on the newspaper Tifliskie Vedamosti, the publication, yes, we know, but there is no scholarly evaluation on this publication. In 1847, a text titled as Köroğlu Predania was published in the newspaper Kavkaz. It has some similarities with the collection published by Alexander Cholsko, but it is unclear where it was collected. In 1850, a Georgian play author, Z. Antonov, wrote a play titled Köroğlu, which was based on the story The Valley of Şamlıbel or Şamlıbel, written by E. Evliyanov in 1849. In 1856, Pam translated some of the episodes and poems of Köroğlu into Russian and published them in the newspaper Kavkaz. In 1856, Nikolai Chernyshevsky published an introduction about this translation and published it in the newspaper Sovremenlik. In 1872, the first Georgian written mention of Köroğlu was published in the newspaper Tisiskari. This publication talks about Köroğlu's kidnapping of Nigar Hanım and his adventure to Isfahan. This translation of Köroğlu episodes made very wide impact on the Georgian people that the epic became very popular. In 1882, a famous Georgian poet, Rafael Eristavi, wrote a poem titled as Köroğlu and narrated the last episode of the epic Köroğlu. In 1887, another famous Georgian poet, David Gigishvili from Tbilisi, translated some poems he listened from the Ashiks, whom our friends provided information yesterday. In 1906, the poet Ekici translated and published some poems in the newspaper Kavkaz number 24. In 1911, Mark collected and published an episode about how Köroğlu's horse was stolen and how he got it back in the town of Imerkevi. The singer of this collection narrated all the episodes in poetry. In 1926, Sej Jikiye collected 7 episodes from the narrator Muhammed Yusufoğlu at Adigeni Fuate. In 1964, an extensive collection of Köroğlu narratives in Georgia was made by Ekici. Ekici published a book consisting of 9 episodes in 1964. In 2015, Alcazar Kaşık prepared a doctorate dissertation titled as Ajara Variants in the Georgian versions of Köroğlu at Shotarustovelli University in Bathurli. So there are some other publication, of course, but I'm not going to go in detail. So this was last year our meeting with the Azerbaijani manuscript in the manuscript archive in Tbilisi. Okay. So, as a result of being narrated in a vast area, it is necessary to divide those narrations in 2 groups. In other words, the epic narratives of Köroğlu have been divided into 2 cycles, the Eastern cycle and the Western cycle. The Eastern cycle includes the narrative told in Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Eastern Turkestan, China, or among Uyghur Turks. The Western cycle includes Köroğlu narratives told in Azerbaijan, Turkey, Iran, Georgia, Armenia, and some of the Balkan countries like Bulgaria. It might be asked that the reason for this division, the main differences arises from the birth of hero and the name of hero. The Eastern cycle of the epic begins with the adventures of hero's father and mother. The first hero's father dies, then the mother dies while she was pregnant to the hero and gives birth in the graveyard. The baby hero is found at the graveyard. The word "gor" or "gur" means graveyard. And thus the hero gets his name from the birthplace. Some of the episodes in the Eastern cycle also include the incident of blinding the hero's father. In the episodes of the Western cycle, there is no mention about the mother, but only the father, who is introduced as a horsekeeper at the farm of a wealthy ruler. The father was asked to choose a couple of horses that will be given as a gift to a ruler
who is a guest. The father of hero chooses big colts that do not promise to turn into great horses, and the guest ruler refuses to take these unpromising horses and also says disgraceful words about the horses. As a result, his wrong choices, the father of hero was ordered to be blinded by the wealthy ruler. Thus, the hero called Köroğlu, the son of blind man. The epic cycle of Köroğlu is narrated as an independent episodes which are known in Turkish as whole, part. While the number of episodes in the Eastern cycle is said to be between 40 and 60, in the Western cycle it is much less. There are only 22 episodes. It is possible to classify them in 4 groups. So the Eastern cycle of the epic and the Western cycle of the epic are quite different after the birth of hero. And there are, like in Tajik version, they say there are 60 episodes of Köroğlu narratives. Whereas in Uzbekistan it might be 40, in Turkmenistan maybe 42, but in Azerbaijan, in Turkey, and some other versions told in Caucasus, in the Western cycle, not more than 22 episodes. So I like to classify them into 4 groups. The first one, episodes about the emergence of Köroğlu and his settling his legendary place called Çamlıbel or Şamlıbel. The second group, episodes about how Köroğlu gathered brave men under his rule. Third group, the episodes about the romantic adventures of Köroğlu and his men. The fourth group, the episodes about the aging and disappearance of or death of Köroğlu. At this point, it might be useful to provide some information about the contents of the Western cycle of the epic Köroğlu. In this version, the cycle, as I said before, begins with the blinding of the future hero's father. According to narrative told in Turkey and Azerbaijan, he was working as a horseman either for the Bey of Bolu, or Pasha of Erzurum, or Shah of Iran. One day, he was asked to select a couple of the best horses from the stable, but the horses he selects are not preferred as a gift for a highly respected guest of the Shah of Iran or the Bey of Bolu. Bey means, in this case, the governor. As a result of his choice, an argument takes place between the horseman and the master ruler. The argument ends up with the master issuing an order for the horseman to be blinded. The blindness of the father provides a nickname for the hero, whose real name is told as Rushen, which is a Persian word. Ali, it's an Arabic word, or Rushen Ali together. Rushen means bright or light. It's a kind of contradiction. I mean, he is blinded, his father was blinded, the son, original name of the son is Rushen. As soon Rushen is informed about this act of injustice committed by the master of his father, he intends to take his revenge. However, his father stops him until they are able to breed the colts selected by his father. Rushen Ali takes good care of the colts according to his blind father's advice. After a few years, one of the colts turned to be unusually magnificent horse named Kırat, or great horse. Then the father and the son go to the master's palace to take revenge. According to some versions, they kill the ruler, and some they kill also all the soldiers of unjust ruler. The hero and his father now must find a place to live. Taking his father's advice, Rushen Ali selects a place called Çamlıbel, a hill covered with pine trees that overlooks an intersection of caravan roads. On the top of this hill, Rushen builds his legendary castle and begins to pillage passing caravans and merchants. Following the first episode, the cycle continues with a set of new adventures of Köroğlu. Within this group of branches, we are told about how Köroğlu gathered a large number of brave men to join him at Çamlıbel. But the most of those men are middle-class people, such as blacksmith, coppersmith, butchers, and farmers. With the growing number of people at Çamlıbel, more and more caravans and merchants are attacked by Rushanali and his band. As a result of their attacks, more and more complaints reach to the palace of Ottoman Sultan or Shah of Iran. When the Sultan asks about the leader of outlaws or bandits, the name is told as Köroğlu. The third group of episodes is constructed similarly to each other. The main plot of this group of episodes can be described as follows. A girl of wealthy Pasha or sister of Sultan falls in love with Köroğlu or one of his men. And then Köroğlu is informed about this feeling and decides to meet the girl. After the hero meets the girl, he tries to convince her to go with him to Çamlıbel. Regardless of whether or not the girl is ready to run away, the hero kidnaps the girl. While fleeing from the palace of the girl's father, the hero is pursued by the father, her brother, or other suitors. The hero fights against the pursuers and gains victory over them. In some versions, when it seems to be he is going to lose the battle, his brave men come to his help at the last moment and help him to win. Finally, the hero and the girl return to Çamlıbel, where the wedding ceremony takes place. In the last group of narratives, it is told that Köroğlu gets very old, gathers his men and tells them he will go on a trip to the south. Before his departure, he appoints one of his men as the ruler of Çamlıbel. Köroğlu rides his great horse away and never returns. However, one of his men sees him among the 40 holy men and discovers that Köroğlu has become one of the holy people or saints. In some other version, Köroğlu dies as a result of accidentally shooting himself. According to the narrators, Köroğlu meets a shepherd carrying a newly invented rifle. This is the first rifle he has ever seen, and it provokes his interest. Even though he is warned that this new invention may kill him, he doesn't believe so. In his curiosity, he inadvertently shoots himself and dies. Now I'd like to point out the popular ideas behind each group of these episodes. The main subject of the first group of narratives is to present the reason for the emergence of a hero whose strength and abilities are associated with a number of supernatural elements. In this narrative, we encounter an ideal hero who defends the rights of the folk who suffered from the injustice of local rulers. Although he is regarded as an outlaw by the government, he is most beloved hero of the poor people. This is one of the basic elements which explains us to what makes the narratives about Köroğlu so popular. The second group of narratives has the idea of gathering common people who are suffering from the injustice of local rulers under the command of a leader with whom they gain strength and power to revolt against those unjust rulers. It should also be noted that this revolt by the poor people is only against the local rulers and the unjust wealthy merchants. It is not aimed directly against the state. This is quite an interesting point that I like to underline again. Köroğlu and his men never aims to revolt against the state. Their target is unjust wealthy merchants and unjust local rulers. So that is kind of a difference pointed out by the narrator of the epic, especially in the Western cycle of the epic. So according to narratives, neither Köroğlu nor any of his men act against the wishes of the Sultan or the Shah. It is clear that while Köroğlu is fighting against the local authorities of the state, he never aims to destroy the state. The third group of narratives present the romantic adventures of Köroğlu and his men. The number of narratives in this group is more than any other three groups. These narratives are very similar to minstrel romances of Azerbaijan and Turkey, and also told in Georgia. You may have heard about the name of Aşık Garip. He is originally from the city of Tbilisi. We really don't know where his house and graveyard in Tbilisi, but it is a wonder of Turkish scholars. We are hoping to find someday the place of Aşık Garip in the city of Tbilisi. That is very important for Turkish scholarly work. So the most important characteristics of these narratives is the balance between the romantic and heroic elements. The romance presented in this group of stories involves a poor but brave man falling in love with the daughter of a wealthy family and a noble prince. The romance here has no mystic aspects which require that the lover cry, search for the beloved one, and struggle with a number of obstacles in order to reach her. This is Aşık Garip's story. When they fall in love with a beautiful girl, they veer on their weapons, ride the horses to the place where she lives, meet her by deception, introduce themselves, and explain their feelings. They pass a test set by the girl, and then they flee with her to Çamlıbel, where their wedding ceremony takes place. The most important aspect of these adventures is to fight for the girl whose relatives and suitors pursue the hero. I mean, instead of between the classic romantic stories and the heroic romantic adventures of Köroğlu differs at this point. That is quite interesting. In classic minstrel stories, we encounter the hero always suffers. But in Köroğlu, they fight for her. That is how heroic romantic adventures are differentiates from the classic minstrel stories. The last group of narratives is also creation of folk beliefs. According to narratives in this group, Köroğlu doesn't receive a simple form of death. He actually doesn't meet death. Instead, he remains immortal. It is a folk understanding that such a hero like Köroğlu, he has such unusual strength, knowledge, poetic ability, and a magnificent horse shouldn't meet the death. Thus, the last group of episodes narrates how Köroğlu grows old and realizes that he has accomplished his mission in this world, which doesn't remain to be same, and gathers his men, tells them he will go on a journey, and appoints one of them as the chief until he returns. Then he rides toward the south. Basically, Köroğlu disappears from this world. He never returns to Çamlıbel, but one of his men meets him at the place where the holy people, Kırklar in Turkish, are gathered. It is understood that Köroğlu has become one of the 40 holy people. This is a widely known folk story motif that is also inserted into the epic story cycle of Köroğlu. What this means is that our hero has become an immortal and he continues to help poor or people in need of him. Some other narratives tells us how Köroğlu died. However, this death will not be very simple. According to the narrators, he meets a shepherd who is carrying a newly invented rifle and asks him about this unusual thing hanging on his shoulder. The shepherd tells him about the power of the rifle, but Köroğlu doesn't believe that such thing can kill a man. Although the shepherd warns about the danger of the power of the rifle, Köroğlu insists on testing it on himself, and the result is obvious, that he kills himself. So, in this end too, Köroğlu doesn't die by way of any conventional power of his time or under normal circumstances. His death must be a different one. Both of final episodes present culturally acceptable but an integrated conclusion that are common elements of folk culture or narrative tradition created by aşık, singer, player, narrators. My presentation may be concluded as follows, that most of the elements in the epic cycle of Köroğlu are more international than national, since they reflect the basic ideas of common people. This is one of the reasons why the epic narratives about Köroğlu spread very easily. The second reason, based on the personality of Köroğlu, who as a hero has a number of qualities. Some of his qualities remain constant and some vary between the narrators. The hero's invariable qualities represent the hopes of common people everywhere. Thus, he becomes a folk hero rather than a typical national hero who represents the idea of both the state and the society. It should also be pointed out that it is very easy for any society to adopt such a hero and add new values to his character. Another important reason makes Köroğlu famous is that of narrators. The narrators throughout the centuries have created and recreated episodes about Köroğlu. During the process of oral performances that may have been conducted each time in a different setting, it might have become necessary for the narrators to add new episodes and qualities to the hero that answer the expectation of the audience. It is also important for the narrators to not only be evaluated as the very keepers of folk knowledge. At the same time, they were and they are entertainers. They have to recreate and reshape the hero each time in relation to the time and common people who form the audience. These are the main reasons why and how the epic narratives of Köroğlu have been translated into different languages and adapted as hero of different societies, including all Turkish-speaking countries and the Georgians. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation and providing new information on the Köroğlu epic. And I'm sure that there are many questions in the audience. Please. Are there any questions on the issue?
Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. To continue our yesterday's conversation, I just wonder what is the acceptance of the Köroğlu, I think among young generation of Turkish, Turkish citizens. Do they want to somehow have this epic in their lives? So do they read it? Do they like to have another stories and interpret it? Young Turkish writers, do they interpret the epic plot in their works? Do filmmakers apply to this plot, and do you name your children after these characters and heroes? So how is it present in today's life of modern Turkey?
Thank you very much, Professor Bela, for this question. And it is not an issue of Turkish society, but also the safeguarding the traditional or intangible cultural heritage is the issue of many societies in the world. So let me talk about Köroğlu first. The young generation, of course, know about Köroğlu and folk dancing. The songs about Köroğlu are very famous, and every wedding ceremony in Turkey, usually the young generation and the girls and boys dance with Köroğlu songs. This is one, and also the textbooks in high schools include some parts or at least a couple poems of Köroğlu. Therefore, our young generation are kind of, yes, they know about Köroğlu, who he was. And the Köroğlu tradition is also among the family tradition. People may call themselves living like Köroğlu and I was, the hero himself and his best helper. And when the people get old, talk like that. So the city of Bolu has initiated a number of meetings, like gathering every year all the aşıks, the improvisers, the singers, the narrators, and a competition among them takes place in the city of Bolu. Also, scholarly conferences are added to those festivals as well. And the movie makers are all, of course, aware of it. I have a number of slides, but I didn't bring them. In Turkey, there are a number of movies about Köroğlu from different angles and different qualities of Köroğlu represented in those films, of course. But it is a pity that all the youth know about the British Robin Hood. So while citing an example, they say some of the, what do you call, serious movie in modern time of Turkish creation, Turkish production I'm talking about, they make in speech of one of the actors or actress, they tell each other, you must live like Robin Hood. But they never cite an example of Köroğlu. At that point, we remind those movie makers that, what do you think about Köroğlu? He was taking money from the poor and giving to the rich. So, I mean, it is screenwriters, the producers, and that is a controversial issue, but we have to discuss this here and there, and it is our cultural values and it is our intangible cultural heritage, so the young generation must learn about this heritage. I mean, somehow, I'm not blaming the young generation, but pity that we are not letting them to learn, and it is important for them, for their identities, cultural identities, and it is shared, it is mutual. I mean, a Georgian young boy or girl may talk about Köroğlu, a Turkish young man and boy about Köroğlu, but both do not know about Köroğlu, but both of them somehow aware of Robin Hood. So it is popular culture, the pop culture is invading our lives more and more. That is why UNESCO in 2003 offered this new convention, the Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage. And no convention in UNESCO has been signed by the 178 states in the world. Has become the part of party to this convention. So that reflects it's a huge problem all over the world. Therefore, Köroğlu is
one of these, but I really want to know more about the Georgian version and the Black Sea region. We have Köroğlu stories, Köroğlu mountains, and you also have in Georgia, and also in Bulgaria, the minorities are telling, Turkish minorities I am talking about, telling the Köroğlu stories. It was collected, and at least 4 or more Black Sea states or the people on the shores of Black Sea sharing this tradition. And besides them, the Armenians also have, and the Ashuks of Armenia sings in Turkish, the song and the poetry part of this epic in Turkish. They narrate in Armenian, the prose part, the poetry part is sung by a musical instrument in Turkish. Thank you very much.
So, one question. So, you say Agarian folk narrators. In Agara folk narrators call it sometimes Köroğlu hikaye.
Köroğlu hikaye.
Hikaye.
Hikaye is the Arabic word.
Yeah, and sometimes these narratives vary from different regional parts, and they mention some cities, mention some as if geographic locations, but there are no actual historical such cities mentioned there, and. Yes, those fairy tale-like narratives in the Agarian version of Köroğlu hikaye, are they translated back into Turkish? I'm interested as a translator myself. Are they back translated? Yes, yes. If there is an interest, then I would also mention that, yeah, it resembles Arsena Marabdeli as well.
If you do so,
yes, and any good blockbusters would also help to popularize those national folk heroes.
Thank you very much. We know about Agara versions, but there is no translation into Turkish. I mean, what is being told in Georgia, in Georgian about Köroğlu. That is really good point. The city mayorship of city of Bolu very much interested, and they are establishing a large museum and a library dedicated to whole Köroğlu scholarship and Köroğlu works. And we may develop a project on translating these Agara versions into Turkish, and may be supported by the...
Aliko could also be the Aliko. You have mentioned Alcazar Kashia, and Aliko could also participate in that, I think.
Yeah, that is possible. I mean, we can talk about it. The hikaye, when we talk about Köroğlu hikaye, it depends on the narrator. I mean, some of the less eligible, I didn't go in detail about the narrators of the epic, because if a narrator comes from the tradition, the Ashik tradition I am talking about, they learn from the master. But the common folk, a grandfather or mother, may have heard from some others, from a master, from an apprentice of an Ashik, and learn a part of the story, the epic, and narrate it as a hikaye, as a folk tale. It may be some other unusual things added. It depends from whom you collect the text. I mean, the textual criticization of folk narratives are also very important. I mean, for literary work, we mostly focus on the text. In folklore studies, it is also the context. I mean, we have to record both the text and the context. And narrators of the text plays very important role in creating and recreation of the text. So therefore, the dissemination of what text we are talking about, from whom it was collected, who wrote it down, inscribed, and made some changes. That is really
You are talking about the DG archive.
Yes, exactly. So therefore, but even all the texts are valuable, they are important, they must be collected, re-narrated, and what is new edition, we must see. Thank you.
Müsaadenizle bu çeviriyle ilgili bir bilgi vermek istiyor bugünkü versiyonların. Kalbinin gazetofu İngiliz surat ekrep tarhunotun gaygoran. Არა, ინგლისურად სურათ, მე ქართულად უნდა ვაბარაკე. თქვენ გითხეთ თარგმანებზე, ითარგმნა თუ არა ქართული ვარიანტები, ანუ აჭარული ვერსიები თურქულად, რაც შეეხება კაშიას მიერ მოგროვილ მასალებს, რომელიც წიგნის სახით.
Ajarian versions translated into Turkish language.
თურქულად ჯერჯერობით არ არის თარგმნილი.
We don't have any translation.
მაგრამ სტატია კონდა, თქვათ, ბოლოს ქოროღლის კონფერენციაზე უნდა მიიღო მონაწილეობა, რაღაც ფრაგმენტები, რა თქმა უნდა, თურქულად აქვს, ცოტა მხოლოდ.
We have a paper, an article by Metin Ekici that was translated into Russian language.
კაშიას თვითონ თარგმნილი ქონდა, თვითონ ალეკოს თარგმნილი, რამდენიმე ფრაგმენტები თურქულად.
Some fragments were translated into.
დიახ, რაც შეეხება ყველაზე დიდ გამოცემას, ასე ვთქვათ, ქართულ ენაზე, ქალბატონი ლიაჭდაიძის მიერ შედგენილი ტექსტი, რომელიც ჩაწერილი ქონდა, ეს წიგნი გამოცემული არის, ანუ ქოროღლის ქართული ვარიანტები ქართულ და რუსულ ენაზე, ტექსტიც და თვითონ ანალიზიც.
The book on Köroğlu epic was published into Georgian and Russian languages too.
და თურქეთში აიღეს ის რუსული ვერსია, რაც იყო და ის ითარგმნა თურქულად.
And only
რუსული ვერსია.
Only Russian version is
ქალბატონი ლიაჭდაიძის წიგნიდან, ანუ რუსული ვარიანტი. მაგრამ სამწუხაროდ რუსულ ტექსტებში არის სრულყოფილი ტექსტი, არ არის რუსული თავისთავად და თარგმანიც ძალიან და თარგმანის თურქულად არ არის სრულყოფილი.
And also the translation is not complete.
ამიტომ ჩვენ ვთვლით, რომ უახლოეს ხანებში ჩვენი თურქოლოგების ვალია ყველა ის ქართული ვარიანტი და აჭარული ვერსიები ითარგმნოს თურქულად, რომ თურქულმა სამეცნიერო საზოგადოებამ ნახოს და გაიცნოს.
And we would like to translate on Georgian versions and Ajarian versions too into Turkish language in the nearest future. And it will be our contribution.
Bu işi de Türkologlara kaldı yine. Ama bunun çevirmesi gerektiğini çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you very much. It's really important.
Was the epic of Köroğlu disseminated in Crimea?
There are some texts collected from Crimea. It is by way of the publication in both Istanbul and Kazan, where the two publishing houses worked together during the Ottoman Empire, and there are very little text collected, but as far as we know, the connection between Istanbul and Crimea disseminated the epic Köroğlu to Crimea. And even some parts from Moldova among the Gagavuz Turks. I mean, it is like folk tale among Gagavuz. Köroğlu is also known in Moldova.
So thank you again for your presentation and new insights.
I thank you very much.